right now, so I got up late. So what I'm planning to do, I'm not gonna go. I'm not going to go over to the gas station with the homeless people camping out. If you can tell, there's like 4 homeless people camping out. I actually desperately need gas, but I'm not like, or maybe they're actually getting work done. It's sometimes hard to tell if somebody's homeless or if they're doing a job. I feel bad. Well, I don't know if I feel bad. It's like I used to dress in a way whereby people used to think I was homeless. So I mean, at the end of the day, and around here, like, yeah, it's not like you're almost $3 per gallon. I'm so angry with Cura for doing what it's done. I'm going to reprint. I'm gonna have to reprint those files. And I'm not terribly happy about the prospect of that. So when we get back to, yeah, when we get back to the house, we're going to look at that. And no, I'm still trying to figure out. My brother knows how to do this. Is it set? Is it that setting? Like, how? How do I change from the, that's the mirror setting. There's so many blooming buttons on these things these days. Scan, radio, media, text. Setup? No. No, I don't want to change the odometer. I want to literally just see the other settings. How do I do this? I might have to just Google it and see what AI tells me. I've been teaching like a lot of people, like some younger people, some older people. It's like, you can ask people for help with these things. Like if my brother was here, I'd probably just ask him and he'd try to show me. I've done it before. I figured it out on my own before. But this vehicle just has so many flipping buttons in it. Maybe it's, no, that's volume. Yeah, they just have, it's just so many flipping buttons. I would say, like, for my vehicle, like, you know, I don't know. I do think that, generally speaking, I don't know. I don't know if that's really something I would really need to complain about. I think when it comes to, you know, your vehicle's you know, modules or what have you, I do think it is a bit overly complex. I think sometimes one of the things I think about a lot of these devices is they don't seem to be very intuitive. They come with like manuals, like a lot of your devices, a lot of your like the phones they come out with, a lot of, you know, your vehicles, your TVs. I think one of my primary areas of of aggravation with a lot of these devices isn't that they have all of the options that they have, but that the features that are most likely to be used by beginners and those who are advanced, semi-advanced, the average person, even if they are relatively advanced in terms of utilizing this technology, the most commonly desirable settings are difficult to find. Sometimes, like I was just mentioning with the Ultimaker Cura software, where where in that case, it's not a case of whether or not it's intuitive or not entirely, although that's part of it. It's also the fact that it resets every time, like between every time, either every time you make new G code or every time you reopen it, which is not something you want in software. You don't want software to reset every time you load it and remove every change you've made to the settings. That is incredibly problematic for any software developer. Although some software will be like that, which to me doesn't make sense. But generally speaking, I think software and hardware should be relatively intuitive. Not that you don't still need to learn about the devices you're using. Obviously, you need to learn about them, but there should be, I think, relatively a relatively ease of access. I love how the trees look right now. That's gorgeous. There should be a relative ease of access, not in the sense that not necessarily in the sense that it won't be complicated at all for someone who is unfamiliar, say, with a car, or unfamiliar, say, with a certain piece of software, or or phones, or this or that. But in this sense that, if somebody has a familiarity with these things and they get a new one of a different brand, a different make, a different model, a phone, a car, a computer, there should be some semblance of, and I think it would be much easy. It would be much more satisfactory if there was some semblance of, hey, you want to check the other settings on your dashboard. The button is right underneath where you would look at those settings, or it has a clear indication that that's what that's for. And there's not a ton of other buttons that do things that are not accessed regularly. Or let me give actually a good example. So to change settings on on part of my vehicle that relates the portion of my vehicle that relates to whether or not I'm utilizing my sound through a Bluetooth device or through the radio, etc. It's on the left side of my steering wheel. It's not on the right side of my steering wheel, right next to the device. It's for some reason positioned relatively far away from the portion of the vehicle that it's directing, making it not the clearest button to push. And then above it is volume and things like that. And it could be arguably convenient. And of course, maybe with the way where your eyes go and things, they might argue that it might be more convenient to someone who is already aware where every single button is. But I think it would be much more. I do think that a lot of people would find greater satisfaction, or at least lesser aggravation, to have the buttons placed in areas that would seem to relate to, this is where what this button is intended to alter. This is what this button is intended to alter. I don't want to have I don't want to have portions of my vehicle positioned, or my phone, or my software positioned in such ways that it seems very non-intuitive in terms of oh, this goes to this thing way over there, or this effect, this thing that I have to go through this setting, and then I have to go to this setting, and then I have to go to this drop down menu to finally find what I'm looking for on something that might actually be a pretty common feature for advanced and semi-advanced users of this device. Or, you know, it doesn't seem like a lot of our hardware and software are created in ways by which, you know, people who are familiar with the technology, but not necessarily that model or that particular kind of that particular version of the software, we have to like seemingly jump through hoops to find it. Fortunately, there's AI now, but it doesn't seem like a lot of these like common, like the things that you would want most in a piece of software or a piece of hardware don't seem to be the front and center. Like access to changing my settings of my dashboard so I can see my odometer would seem to be one of the most pivotal settings in the vehicle. I don't know where to find it, but you would think that that would be front and center in a sense, not necessarily bigger, but clearly obvious in terms of relation to where it is on the vehicle. And like these kinds of settings being so counterintuitive, it's odd because you'll have like other settings that are front and center, like the big button on my steering wheel that changes the settings on the music I listen to. Well, fine, like you could argue that that's important, but there's also another button right next to it that changes the volume, and a button where I can go up and down. And I can change settings right here, but for some reason they also place it on the steering wheel, which distracts me from finding whatever button or lever I need to see my odometer, which also I have to actually change the settings to see the odometer. It's not just there. They could have that with other settings. A lot of these modern, like I think basically all of the modern vehicles that are more modernized, they have it instead of just having the odometer just there all the time. They allow you to see other settings, but then when you see other settings in that little screen, it doesn't have the odometer there anymore. Instead of just having the odometer somewhere on the dashboard where it's constantly there, so that when you look down, you know, you don't have to guess when you next need to get a oil change. And it's like the one vehicle I got at one point had the battery in the trunk instead of under the hood. It's like, who comes up with this stuff? It doesn't make sense. Now, in terms of the battery being in the trunk instead of under the hood, in one sense, it might like, oh, it's convenient. We place the way we position things under the hood in this vehicle. We put that in the trunk to make more room. Okay, I mean that to a certain extent makes sense. But then why would you do it that way? Because the trunk is where you often store things, and some people store things in the trunk for a long period of time or a short period of time, whatever the case may be. It's where you put your groceries. You know, a lot of us, you know, want to have an empty trunk, but we often find ourselves, you know, especially if we're in the midst of moving, or if we're moving things from one place to another a lot, we often find that the trunk is you know, has things in it regularly. We might want to have two spare tires, one on the top and the bottom. So having the battery under there, it just is such an inconvenience. It doesn't seem to make sense. Under the hood, you're not hopefully. Oh wow. Oh, I love these birds. I haven't seen one of those in a while. But you know, you don't typically put things under the hood. It's, you know, it is the clear space to put something like a car battery. It's the clear place to put your spark plugs. It's the clear place to put your engine and oh fudge. I'm still tired. My mind's slipping me. Everything that you would want to do maintenance on, you would expect, you know, for the, you know, regular maintenance, I would say, relatively regular, or things that are most common to break down, you know, that can't be placed elsewhere, that doesn't have to be placed somewhere else in the vehicle. It would make sense to place it under the hood. You know, the pivotal elements of your vehicle that pertain to your oil, your electricity, yeah, I mean, the electricity in the car, your oil, obviously, you know, the way that, you know, gas tanks have traditionally been, you know, designed, you know, that's, you know, there's There are some portions of the vehicle that, obviously can't all just be jammed under the hood and nothing anywhere else. We know that. But, taking things that have traditionally been placed under the hood for the convenience of mechanics and lay people alike who also want to work in their vehicles, it just doesn't, it's nonsensical to me. And, placing buttons on your vehicle, by the way, having two buttons in multiple areas that do the exact same thing, and then distracting, especially if you have dyslexia, but even if you don't, distracting from the buttons that do things that are also, pivotal to your to regular maintenance, and then you can't find it because you're looking through all these other buttons that and some of which, again, may be duplicate buttons. It's nonsensical. And then having software whereby it resets the settings that you preset every single time you open it. You have to reset the settings, especially like with my 3D printing software, where now I spent like 30 hours printing something that I can't use now because it won't print. It won't like I disabled the the um, the the pressing the setting that presses the items back to the base. You disable that, and I figure I figured it would just build supports underneath like I did the last time. What ended up happening was, because I guess there was a second setting that maybe I must have pushed before, that got reset. I had to disable something that I guess becomes enabled every time you turn off the app and then turn it back on again. I think one of my biggest gripes with the way that hardware and software is often created is that it is done in such ways that are incredibly inconvenient to the average user. And there's a reason why at my job I spend hours literally teaching people how to use the hardware and and sometimes the software, although that's often because they're not reading, but how to use the hardware, that's already there. Now there is something to say, and of course a lot of these people are just unfamiliar with like how to use credit cards, but on the other side of it, there is a level of, I think, responsibility of the designer to make an effort to make something more more intuitive and more obvious, and even to some extent to make hardware and software that can be used in such a way that people of average familiarity with the hardware can just do it. One of the things that bugs me about card readers, now, I will admit that I learned when I was like in my early 20s, maybe my late teens. I knew which way to place the black magnetic tape to swipe a card. Like, I don't think that, I think that I am a bit shocked at the number of people who don't know how to swipe a card. At the same time, it does lead to the question, why is the magnetic tape on many card readers the world over supposed to face the majority of the machine of the reader, the physical part of the device? Why is the black magnetic tape specifically supposed to typically face one particular side of the machine? There are card readers, now with tap, it's I think less of a concern for many people, unless they're going to Walmart. But there are plenty of card readers that will read the black magnetic tape from either side. Now, to be fair, there are people I have met that don't even know that the black magnetic tape goes on the inside, and I'm getting to the point where I kind of I got to the point where I'm like, yeah, no, I have to actually, where I actually am want to explain which side is left and which side is right, because I noticed that there were two times where I was trying to explain, like I was either like to your left or to your right or something like that, and so I have recently discovered that a lot of people are not based on that experience, it would seem that there's a significant portion of of the adult population that aren't terribly familiar with the difference between left and right. That I will say is concerning, but there are a lot of people with autism, and the number might actually be significantly higher than I thought. But at the same time, though, actually, plenty of people with autism are actually very good at their lefts and rights. So I don't know. But my best friend has autism. I don't know. I think he struggled with left and right when I was. Oh, look at this squirrel. Oh, I think he struggled with left and right the other day, but it wasn't because he didn't. I don't think it was because he didn't know the difference. I think it was because, and maybe he doesn't, but I think it was because he was trying to do what I wanted him to do, and I think he's probably used to his parents being a little bit more cruel, or maybe other people in his life being more cruel and like, no, do it this way, do it this way. And of course, I'm not like that. I'm like, nope, to your left, like to your left, friend, to your left, brother, to your left. It's like I think the squirrel went away. It's like after I pointed the camera at it, I wonder if he can sense the there's something that emits from the camera that can affect spiders. I don't know if it's a form of light radiation or something. I remember there's some sort of science behind it. Look at that. He was grabbing and cleaning his tail. Let me see if I can get him. But I don't know exactly what it is precisely. Where did he go? Oh, he would go into the car. But anyway, it just despite all that, there are just people who are used to using checks. There are just people who are used to using tap. So older people are often used to using cash and checks. Younger people are often used to using tap. So it would, to me, be a reasonable form of like a form of scaffolding for the consuming base to allow for a card reader that doesn't accept tap. And a lot of these people just don't know, like a lot of them don't know how to swipe a card, period, which that boggles my mind because a lot of them are older. But I don't know, they might have autism, they might be immigrants, they might be used to check and cash. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why they might not know how to use a card. It kind of boggles my mind because I grew up with it. But then again, I also understand that there are a lot of people who grew up with cash or whatever, or they might have grown up in like severe poverty and they weren't around a lot of money. So like those kind of transactions might, but then again, you would have food stamp cards and like WIC cards. So like I grew up with my mom using WIC. So I don't understand exactly because, like she had a baby and, the guy, it didn't work out. So like, and we didn't get child support. So it's like, or anything like that. So it's like it makes and by the way, I ended up finding him and he's actually a sweetheart. But like there whatever reason for those things happening, I'm not saying either one are evil people. I love my parents, both of them. And I love my stepdad who is my dad. He raised me. I love all my parents, but I'm not. It's not my job to say why things happen the way they did. I'm not. So I'm trying to let you guys know. Please don't think my parents are bad. Like please don't take my dad's side or my mom's side. I don't like people taking sides with that. It's like your parents are your parents. I don't know all the details, so who am I to judge? But um, you know, I don't know. Like I don't. Okay. There to a certain degree, I don't know why people don't know how to use cards. That is kind of baffling. But on the other end of the spectrum, it's like, well, as you would think that you would want customers to have the easiest experience possible. I don't think it's a secret that a lot of customers don't know how to use cards. And even if you're just thinking about the elderly people who may be less familiar with cards, you would think that it would make sense to make the black magnetic tape readable, whichever side it's facing. Now, it is true, and this is true even if you ask AI. It has been for quite some time, the black magnetic tape faces the direction of the majority of the reader machine. That's not something that's new. That's something that's been around. AI will tell you that's the way most of these machines function, at least traditionally. If you want to make sure that your card is read every time when you swipe it and it's not a chip card, you swipe with the black magnetic tape facing the majority of the machine. This is something that's been the case for like 50 years or more. I don't know exactly when cards were invented, but this has been true the entirety of my life. And I've been alive for 35 years. However, um, because there are people for a variety of reasons, mental health issues, elderly, young and inexperienced, and maybe their parents really didn't take them out. Maybe they, which I don't know, that sounds kind of abusive if they kept them cooped in constantly and sheltered them in that way. Maybe out of selfishness because they didn't feel like taking their kids with them, but that is a problem too. But like whatever the reason for not knowing how to swipe a card, we know there are people who don't know how to swipe a card or forget or who don't know how to swipe a card on these particular machines or those particular machines. It would make sense to design all of these machines, especially with the technology we have these days and how affordable it is, to be able to read the magnetic tape from both sides. It doesn't make sense to not have that. So a lot of these designs, even when the price shouldn't really change all that much. I mean, if you're talking about like an extra, like $5 for the device to have that feature, and if you're a corporation buying these devices and you're a company that sells to corporations, why wouldn't you just have a $5 markup? Like, are companies like Walmart literally going out of their way to find the cheapest possible options that would even cut costs by, say, $50 for a store? But I don't know if that's the case, because you look at the cost. One of the things that affects your overall cash flow is going to be how quickly your customers are able to make their purchases, or if they're even able to figure out how to make them at all, and how quickly you can get from one customer to the next. So another issue I would have with the hardware being designed that way is, because it's designed that way, you're looking at hours and hours and hours quickly adding up to days and days and days and days of loss in customers and loss in revenue. Because if you have 1 out of 5 customers coming through, especially in an area where education is not very, very high, like my neighborhood, where it's, where the educational variable is typically very low. um, you know, you would expect to want to develop your hardware and your software in a way that is incredibly intuitive. Now, there are a lot of people, I think it's something like 1/3 of people or more, who are functionally illiterate, and fine. So they might not be able to read what the device says. That's one of the reasons we also color code the yes and the no. I'll tell people that the green means yes, the red means no. Makes it easier. That's another thing too. If you don't know, if you look at a screen and you see a green and you see a red button, even if it doesn't have the words yes and no on them, you should know what green symbolizes and what red symbolizes. It's literally, if you're driving, you better know. But a lot of people don't know that either. And it is alarming, but it is what it is. But, well, I wouldn't say it's like super alarming if they don't have a driver's license. But if they do have a driver's license, it is alarming. But again, you have these kind of things. When they had the cash only and the card only on the registers, when they broke, they eventually figured out, I think they realized the illiteracy problem. They started putting a picture of a card on it, and it would also say card only, and then a picture of a dollar bill on it, and it says cash only. It makes sense. And it's a way to communicate to people who can't read. And that's like a fantastic idea. That was a great solution. It's like 1/3 of the population is illiterate, which means even if they can read, it might not be much. So like 1 out of 3 people, something like that. I think it's actually more than that in America, well, in the United States, not in other countries. Um, So it actually, it's like that is a fantastic solution. Use pictures. There's a reason why like stop signs are shaped a specific way. It's so people can read things in more respects than just our typical coded language, written form of language that more advanced members of the population understand. It's a way to convey meaning to even people who have difficulty with more complicated forms of visual communication, at least in terms of our lettering system. It's a fantastic idea to use visuals, to use colors. They did all that. And after doing all that, all these very intelligent ways of addressing the problem of people who are less educated, which is a significant portion of the population, um, less educated in a general sense, not in a specialized field, necessarily. But the fact that the card reader cannot read from both sides, to me, that is such a massive oversight. Like, come on, people. Like, now, like, sure, someone should be told, turn your card the other way around, and they should be able to be told that 1 to 3 times and then never have to ask that again. Now, I think a lot of people will ask that like every time, even if they know. That is ridiculously concerning because they're showing that they don't have the capacity to learn, which is part of the problem. People refusing to learn new things. Um, if that's yeah, not good, not good, not good, not very much not good. Um, yeah. Um, by the way, there's a reason. I do think that the standard for getting your high school diploma should potentially be hired um, because like just passing just about anybody who asks to be passed, I think gives the false notion to employers that these people are just as competent as anybody else. I'm not saying that they don't deserve to make a lot of money and to still have a good job and to have a happy life. But, a high school diploma, an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, these things, to some degree at least, should still be earned, right? In one way or another, we're paying for all of these things, but there should still be a sense of earning them, right? And I think that is a massive issue when we just put, if as a society we just push every single person through. It's like, well, how do you differentiate between someone who actually earned something and the other person who just got it because they talked to some of their teachers and asked them to be to get a passing grade. That's that I think is a bit of an issue. I think if you ask for a passing grade, I think I don't think that's a problem in and of itself, but I think you should come with, this is why I deserve it. This is why I think I deserve an A instead of a B plus on this. This is why I think I deserve a C instead of a D minus, right? Oh, what's up, guys, by the way? What car do I have? Uh, it's this one, the new vehicle is actually, well, it's a used vehicle. It's a Toyota Corolla 2007. And sorry, I wasn't showing the birds. I'm so sorry. I know a lot of what I said sounds bitter, but it's part of the reality. It's like, obviously, I do think everybody, I want them to have access to money. I want them to have access to basic resources and well beyond that. But at the end of the day, I don't want everybody, working on the electric in my house or whatever. And I think in trade schools and in the trades and those businesses, I don't think they just pass everybody through. But in other areas of life, like a lot of high schools and a lot of colleges and universities, will basically push anybody through who participates. And I think that is the issue, because I think all of these things should be earned, because it should show a level of competence and capacity, not just the endurance itself, the ability to endure itself. Because we do see so many areas of society where people just don't understand things. And if we make the penalty for not understanding those things, well, you just don't get a diploma,
or degree, then we might actually see an improvement in the capacity of people who take those things, because there's a good chance that they will try harder to pass and get the things that they want. If we have no penalty for poor performance, then we're likely to get poor performance. It's an obvious consequence of not having penalties for poor performance. Now, that doesn't mean that we have to penalize every person who poorly performs on any given day. We have our up days and our down days, and not everybody has to be penalized. But if you show by example, even a few people getting penalized for poor behavior, then other people will often follow suit, concerned that it will happen to them as well. You set an example potentially, and other people will follow suit. You don't have to punish everyone, because if you punish one person or three people, then 50 people may change their behavior accordingly. So, when you have this, and if you understand, psychology, even from a more fundamental level, and if you understand sociology from even a more fundamental level, you understand that you don't necessarily have to set the example with every person. Not everyone has to suffer for their poor behavior, but if you set the example with some people and show that you're willing to do it with others potentially, or at least give that impression, then other people, I think, are more likely to, again, change their behavior. And when you show that there are potential penalties for not doing what you're supposed to be doing, you potentially allow for the opportunity for other people to grow and to have and for the betterment of society. And yeah, I'm gonna have to stop this print, because I think it's pretty clear that it's not. Oh wait, maybe it is printing the supports. Hold on a second. No, because there's nothing supporting it beneath that. I think at this point it's going to be difficult to remove those either way, so I might just let the print go through this time, and then so what I'm going to do is I'm essentially just going to do it again when I'm done. I'm going to let this print go through. I don't know how I'm going to get stuff off, because that looks like it might actually have a little thing to pull it off. So this stuff might, the leaf might actually end up breaking. We might have to change the temperature to make it have the capacity to come off and on. It is incredibly exhausting, some of this stuff. Yeah, I'm gonna have to let you guys go. Take care, guys.